Welcome back. We are in the second part of session 3 for our Leadership and Advocacy program. My name is Judy Blake with Family to Family Network in Houston, Texas. And we are very happy to have our very own Executive Director of Family to Family Network, Mary Jane Williams, presenting for us today. And on a personal note, she is my mentor, my friend. I have learned so much from her. You think you know a lot, and then you get introduced to someone like Mary Jane, and you realize, boy, I have a long way to go. So Mary Jane, I am so happy to have you present. This is such important information, and it's really, I know that your title is Creating IEP Goals to Promote Inclusion, but there are some adult self-advocates in this session. And I think that it's really just important about promoting inclusion for everyone. So, and that was one of the things that our previous presenter discussed, and we're so happy to have you today. Thank you so much.
For that, and I was trying to figure out how to adapt this, and I'm not sure I'll have much luck, but anyway,
no worries.
I'll try my best.
It's all good information. Thank you.
So anyway, thank you everyone for having me join you today. I'm going to whip through a training that probably takes about 2 hours in time if we were going to make it really interactive. We're going to sort of talk about that vision and curriculum and assessment and instructional arrangement and then placement, because I know that's one thing that Charlene talked a lot about is, you know, that importance of belonging. And a lot of times school districts use this IEP or the individualized education program to exclude kids from disabilities within the special, you know, regular education system. So I really want to talk about the purpose of IDEA, and anybody can chime in. I don't know if I can see the chat or not.
Would you like us to help you moderate that? We did that for Charlene.
Yeah, that would be good.
Sure.
You know, the whole purpose of IDEA is to make sure that kids with disabilities have an appropriate public education that emphasizes special education and related services. This should have been written differently so that it said related and special education services, because services, special education is a service, not a place. And it's designed to meet their unique needs, not all the rest of the kids in the class needs. But what's it designed to prepare them for? Anybody? You can unmute anytime when I ask a question, that's okay, and throw your answer in, but the whole purpose of this is to prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. And where do we see that? You hear that from the school district. They talk about college and career readiness. And you know, college and career readiness is important for kids with disabilities too. It's not just for the general ed student. It's also for our children with disabilities and even those with the most significant disability label out there. So again, I know you talked about this with Laura last time, really having that vision for the future. How many of you downloaded and used that life chart that she shared with you from Charting the Life course? Did anybody? Can't see if anybody raises their hand or not.
No one has responded just, oh yeah, no one has responded just yet.
That Charting the Life course is really, that worksheet that she provided you was really, it's a great opportunity to create a vision for your child. Or if you're a self-advocate, a vision for yourself. Where do you want to go and what do you need to do? How do you need to get there? So it's really important to think about what the hopes and dreams are for your child and where they're going to go after school is over. And then that IEP is really all those steps that it will take to get there. The biggest thing I can say is, you know, Christopher, there's my son Christopher over on the left side. And
Mary Jane, excuse me for interrupting, but your screen is showing like a big blue block right over Christopher.
A big blue block over Christopher?
Yeah, like it, and then part of it's blocked out and the top is blocked out. So maybe when you go to the next slide. Yeah, and then share
again.
again. Yeah, that would be great. Thank you.
I think I shared the wrong one, maybe.
No, it was okay. It was just, yeah, that's a little better. Yeah, much better. Thank you.
Okay. So I just can't see any of you now, so I don't know what that is, but
yeah, there you go. Much better. Well, now it just, yeah, the block is to the right. It's not as bad. Vision for your child. There you go. As you're kind of moving the blocks out of the picture, that helps. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, I'm gonna get rid of hide the video panel then. I don't know why it's doing
maybe that. I think that's it. Perfect. Now your screen looks great. Thank you.
Okay, so I can't see anybody. So if you raise your hand or do something, I just can't see anybody now. Okay. So, this is Christopher, and he really had a dream of being a fireman when he was younger. And as a parent, I'm thinking about, okay, if he wants to be a fireman, basically they have to have a college education, 60 hours of credit. How are we going to get there? And it was just really important for me when I was with the IEP team to really talk about, well, his vision is to have a job. He wants to work at the fire department. How are we going to get there? You don't have to know that as a family. It's really important to be able to just be able to express that dream and tell people what you think your son or daughter will be able to do when they grow up. And it's important for you also as a family member, as you're preparing for an individualized education program meeting, to really think about some of those things that are really important for your child to be able to do. I really hate when I go to a transition fair meeting, a resource fair, rather, a transition fair at a high school, and I see parents who've got kids in that 18 to 21 range, and I'm like, oh, so what's the plan after high school? Oh, we don't know. Well, what about work? And they say, well, our child can't work because their behavior is bad. Well, guess what? That's one of those important things we want to be working on within the IEP. All the rest of the stuff is pretty immaterial. If your child can't work because of their behavior, or if they can't go to a day program because of their behavior, that's the one thing you want the school to work on. We've really got to think about narrowing our focus and letting the rest of the stuff sort of go to the wayside. I mean, everything is important, but really think for yourself and for the IEP team, think about 2 to 4 things that are really important for your child to be able to do, and just focus on making sure those goals are really the important ones that they work on. I remember going to an IEP meeting with a friend of mine, and she wanted him to work on wiping his face at the lunch table. Some kids just aren't going to do that real well. And why do you want to spend time working on a goal that maybe you could work on at home? And so I encourage families to think about that too. Just think about some really big ideas out there that you will be able to the school can work on, because the less that they have to do, or the more they can concentrate on one area. So just to think about that, and maybe write 2 to 4 things down right now while you're sitting here, what you want your child to be able to do. Yeah, I mean, as I said, write it down, share it with the IEP team, and then remember, you don't have to know how to get there. Laura Buckner and I did a presentation over in Abilene, and it was a 2-part series. And then we came back for a 3rd session, and we really sort of asked families, well, from the first session, what did y'all do with this training? And if you don't get anything out of what Laura did in session 1 and I do in this session, it'd be nice if you could take away the fact that write down your vision for your child. It might take you a while. There was a mom that said that's what she got out of the training. She really needed to write down a vision for her child, and it took her a long time. And when she got to the IEP meeting, at the beginning of the meeting, they always ask you about your parent concerns. And that's when she shared her vision. And she said it was like a light bulb for all the rest of the members of the IEP team. Oh my gosh, it's Saturday morning. That they all of a sudden realized why they were doing what they were doing. So that it just helps, and it changed the whole impact of her meeting and what they were willing to provide. So keep that in mind. If you can take anything away from last session and this session, is really creating that vision for your child. For those of you that don't know, there is a process for the IEP. Placement is not the first choice. You know, Charlene shared that story about the young man who, you know, in kindergarten, oh, we're going to put you over here, the eyeball test. Well, that shouldn't happen for kids with disabilities. There's a process, and it all begins with that individual, full and individual initial evaluation. And then every year we're doing ongoing data collection. We're looking at present levels, and then we're creating goals and objectives. And then we're trying to figure out what aids and services a kid can have. And then we discuss placement. That's why it's at the end of the meeting. Placement shouldn't determine what your IEP goals are. Okay. Region 20 has a nice book or booklet online. It's called the IEP Q&A. It's in their on their progress in the general ed curriculum, but they have a nice flow chart here about IEPs. You know, you're supposed to start with a present level of academic and functional performance, or PLAF. You're going to hear people call it that. And then you create a measurable goal, and those goals can be two types. They can be academic goals, which are based on standards or curriculum, and then functional goals, which are not standards based. So these help kids access the curriculum. So things like speech or OT and PT, they help kids access the curriculum. Whereas if you're working on reading and writing and math, that's learning and making progress in the general curriculum. So I just want you to understand there's two different types of goals, and it's okay to have those different types of goals. Some kids might go through their years in special education and not have any need for academic goals, but they have a lot of functional goals that help them access the curriculum. And that's okay. There's a reason for that. And we need to make sure that we just don't not include kids that don't have academic goals. You know, they have other needs in there. So again, goals are supposed to be based on the present level of the child, and then based on any data or assessment that you have, and that what can be reasonably accomplished in a year. So as you can see in this picture, maybe the child over on the left can only jump 6 inches, and we're going to measure and say, oh, by the end of the year, we'll be able to measure, you know, jump 12 inches. I wish I could do that, but that's not going to be me anymore. But anyway, it really should be based on that data and that initial evaluation about what the child can do right now. There are two different trains of thought. There's Wright's Law. They talk about specific, measurable action words, realistic and relevant and time limited. So specific means, you know, what specifically is the child going to do? How are we going to measure it? Using some action words. It's got to be realistic, mean it's based on real data, and then based on a timeline. Progress in the curriculum, or TEA, likes to use some different terms, and I wanted you to be aware of that. They call it conditions, criteria, behavior, and time frame. So of course, that behavior is that action word, and that's what we're measuring or observing. And then the criteria is really just how much of that, or how often, or what level of that behavior are we going to document progress. And those conditions are what needs to be there for the child to make progress.
Mary Jane?
Yeah.
I just want to let the audience know that I realize Mary Jane's slides appear to be blurry because I checked with other people. So just know that when we send you the slides next week, we'll make sure that they're clear. So yeah, for some reason, Mary Jane, your slides are coming out blurry in the text. So I don't know why that is, but other people are finding the same thing.
Let me see. Let me try to share again.
Okay. I guess everybody's just kind of having internet issues today.
Let me see this one. And let me go down to where we were. Is that better?
A little better, maybe, but
Weird. I mean,
yeah, maybe it's a little better. I'll know when see, with the smaller the text gets, then it's harder to read. Yeah, that was better. That was actually better, I think.
Okay. So present levels are really important, and it's really to be able to identify what your child can do right now. And this is really important because this is how goals are created. When you look at your individualized education program for your son or daughter, you should be able to see present levels listed in your IEP. And those present levels should be pretty clear to you about what your child can do right now. I'm going to give an example of something that they put on my son's present level one time, and he was in high school. It said that he could count to 100, and he could identify all his letters, and he could do. And I had to go back to him and say, he could do all that stuff back in 3rd grade. What can he do right now? So really look at those present levels when you get your IEP. In fact, if I were you, well before your IEP meeting, I would ask them to give you a copy of the present levels and the goals, just so that you can participate a little bit more fully in the IEP. So just like my son, here is a recent IEP PLAF example that I just saw, I mean, literally this week from a family member. And this student, his instructional reading level was increased to level G. He continued with guided reading instruction and scored at 84%. He can answer basic comprehension, what, where, who questions. He demonstrates difficulty answering questions pertaining to vocabulary, main idea details, making inferences, and drawing conclusion. He needs to continue to improve his ability to answer comprehension questions on his instructional level. Can anybody tell me exactly what can this child do?
You can either unmute yourself or type it in the chat box. And for some reason, there we go, Mary Jane, it's gone. Thank you.
Oh, I must be when I put the chat up there to look at it. It's.
Yes, a square appears on your.
Yeah, and it blocks
Okay.
out everything that people can see.
How weird.
That's weird.
I can't see you guys at all. So anyway, well, when you look at this as a parent, I would have a lot of questions. I have no clue what level G is. Is that good? Is that bad? What grade level is that? I don't know if that's a 1st grade level, it's a 10th grade level. This kid is in 7th grade. I don't know what that means. Great, we know he can answer basic comprehension, what, where, who, and we see that he has difficulty answering questions regarding all these other things.
Jennifer,
so they wanted,
one person wrote, can read, not sure what level, and answer who, what questions.
Exactly, that's all I can get out of this. Lots of words to confuse you as parents, but may not tell you anything. So it's really important to go back and ask the questions. What exactly is level G mean? What grade level is that? Do we need to work on the next grade level, reaching the next grade level? I don't know. And then there's a lot of different things here that he can't do. So just remember this. And then when you're coming up with a goal, you have to look at those present levels and think about what can your child do in 1 year. And that's really the hard thing sometimes for us to think about. This was the goal from that present level statement that we just read. You know, here's your timeline, beginning April 20th and 36 instructional weeks. And here's all this stuff he's going to be given. On the prerequisite level, At its instructional level, visual and verbal prompts and cues, modeling prompts, redirection to tasks, more than 3 answer choices, and a wait time. He'll answer higher level comprehension questions. Does anybody know what he's going to be able to do at the end of this, at the end of April 2020? Anybody know?
There's nothing written in the chat box just yet.
Okay, well, I'm going to assume nobody knows. You know what? It's okay if you don't know. If I got an IEP goal like this, I'd be asking, what the heck are we doing? Do we need to work on this student to follow directions and use less prompts? Do we need to work on 4 answer choices? Do we need to, I think when I go back to the present level, main idea and details of the story, she's already jumping in this one to inference and prediction. And I'm sort of wondering why they're jumping to that when back here it said main idea and details. There's a lot of things here we could have separate goals on, just answering questions with vocabulary. Maybe it's just a goal about vocabulary. So anyway, I want you, oops, I'm going the wrong way. Just look, when you look at your goals, really think about what is my child going to be able to do at the end of this year. Goals should be based on your curriculum, and a lot of you, I know, don't get a chance to look at curriculum, but there's 2 places it's located. There are preschool curriculum guidelines, and then, which is basically for kids age 3, 4, 5. And then there's this Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills. And if you've got kids who are really at that prerequisite level, sometimes those preschool curriculum guidelines are a great place to create goals from. And I'm going to show you some examples in a little bit. And then if you have anybody that needs to work on some social and emotional issues, the preschool curriculum guideline is a great place to look, because by the time you get into the Texas Essential Knowledge and Skills, or the TEKS as people call them, a lot of it is academically based, although in your social studies and PE curriculum, you're going to have some social skills in there. But if you want some good places to look at basic behavior and social skills, you're going to find those more in those preschool curriculum guidelines. Okay, let's see. Okay, so I have a little video here to play for you, and I'm hoping it will work for me. Oops. Okay, there it goes. Yay. Oops. And I hope I shared the...
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelly Moore.
Can everybody hear it?
Yes, it's coming through great.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of...
Dang it. Sorry, technology. I'm trying to get it to do.
Welcome to 5 More Minutes, useful videos in 5 minutes or less that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelly Moore. Today's episode is called California Dreaming. Nope, just kidding. Curriculum Dreaming. Okay, curriculum, you know the stuff. It's all the goals and learning outcomes that society tells us we need to teach to the children. What I didn't realize was that it is really important to not just know the goals in the curriculum, I also needed to know how those goals in the curriculum were organized. Now, if you aren't totally immersed in education, you may not be super familiar with curriculum models and organization. But let's compare this to something that we might be more familiar with. I want you to think about the self-help book sections that support us to become our best selves. In many of these books, there are great strategies. There's one that's referred to that's considered a habit of a highly effective person. That strategy is called keeping the end in mind, or in education it's called backwards design. Okay, so here's the idea. You will have a better chance of meeting a goal if you A, know what the goal is, and B, if you make a plan to meet it before you start. So for example, if I had a goal to go to California one day, because everyone has a goal to go to California one day, the chances of me getting there will be way higher if I know where I'm going, when I'm going, how I'm getting there, where am I going to stay, how am I getting home. You quickly start to see how important the plan is if you want to meet a goal. But you also realize that there's multiple answers to these questions. In life and in education, there can be multiple pathways to the same goal, which is great, and it makes it responsive to the person who's trying to meet the goal. This is a much more effective strategy than, say, if I, for example, just decided to leave my house in Vancouver and just start walking north, hopefully finding my way to California. Backwards design is a strategy used every day, and it ranges from travel goals to weight loss goals. It's also used in many curricular organization models. But here's the thing, this is not a linear process, and backwards design is trying to aim to be responsive to the person meeting the goal. But curriculum is often interpreted as the opposite, very linear and not responsive. It's totally standardized. How I used to think about curriculum was like this. Curriculum is in a giant, big red binder, and in September, I start on page 1. And when I'm done with page 1, I move to page 2. And then I get to June 20th, and I have 147 pages left. Well, what if I told you there's another way to read curriculum that better aligns with backwards design big ideas? I want you to imagine that the curriculum is still a book, but the book is not a binder. It's a flip book. Do you remember these books? I love these books. The flip book, it's still the same for everyone, but how it's read depends on who is reading it. There are many ways to read the same flip book. So to make sense of this for curriculum, the first thing we need to do is understand what the pages of the flip book are. These pages represent the different types of goals in the curriculum. In British Columbia, we have 3 kinds of goals. We have content goals. These are the goals about knowledge. We have curricular competency goals, and these are the goals about skills and processes. And we have core competency goals. And these are cross-curricular goals that support the development of the people that we need to become so that we can be contributing members of the world. All of these goals are organized around a big idea. And these are the things we need to understand. Although the book is the same for everyone, the flip book pages we choose can reflect the kids we are teaching and can be responsive to both their strengths and their stretches. As educators, backwards design helps us to keep the end in mind by deciding what the goals are for a unit and how we can teach them in responsive ways that allow students to reach these goals in multiple ways. I think
Go down. Oh. So, I mean, what she says is really important. I think you heard a little bit about that from Charlene, is that we need to be responsive and think about that. And I know for many of you, your children may not be working at grade level, and I want you to understand where you can find the curriculum and the best way to use it. And I like to refer families to the curriculum framework. And then the STAR Alt 2 essence statements, because I'll be able to show you how, whether your kid is in 3rd grade or in high school, you can still be working on the same curriculum. It's just that the goals or in those classrooms may be a little bit different. So this is the STAR Alt 2 spring grade 3 reading essence statement. And if you'll see across the one line, there's different reporting categories that we have for kids. And this first one over here on the left says identify new vocabulary words. The second category says identify themes in fables, legends, myths, and stories. And then the third category is identify the main idea and supporting details. So that's grade 3 STAR Alt 2. And so I'm going to go focus on this identify new vocabulary words. And this is from the curriculum framework. And what I want you to understand is in grade 3, most kids can alphabetize, which is this top row here, alphabetize words, use synonyms and antonyms, determine meaning of unfamiliar words, that sort of thing. But if you follow this down to the bottom of the page, let's see, it's going to go flip over, and then you're going to see some of these beginning reading things. And here it is: identify and read at least 25 high frequency words from a commonly used list. So in grade 3, despite the fact that this is the goal, identify new vocabulary words, we can be looking at just identifying high frequency words from a list. These prerequisite skills are arranged from the highest, meaning the top one up here, down to the lowest. So that was grade 3. Here we are in English 1, and English 1 can be 10th or 11th or 9th or 10th grade, I guess, depending on what it is. And look at what the essence statement for English 1 is. Use a variety of strategies to confirm word meaning. Again, I did a shortened version of this. I think this curriculum framework for English 1 is actually like 3 or 4 pages. But for typical kids that might be in the 9th grade classroom, they're learning about identifying words or word parts from other languages. They're using analogies, using context to, determine meaning. They might use the meaning of foreign words commonly used in English with emphasis on Latin and Greek. So those are some of the skills that maybe a junior in high school would be using, or a freshman, I guess. But if you go all the way down to the bottom of these prerequisite skills, there's that same identify and read at least 25 frequency words from a commonly used list. So that's how your kid can actually still be in the 9th grade classroom, being exposed to stories that are more age appropriate, but still be working on their own goals based on curriculum. It doesn't have to be, the same thing as everyone else. Oftentimes, teachers are teaching a large, broad curriculum, and then for our goals for kids with more significant disabilities might be very few to learn in that curriculum, but often they're going to come out somewhere in between. I know for my son, we were in regular ed English language arts in elementary school, and there was a lot of things we couldn't test him on. And Charlene talked about this. That's many times for our kids, because of their language skills or their lack of any language skills, we assume that they're not learning anything, and that's far from the truth. Probably about 3 or 4 years ago, we were sitting around at dinner and Christopher said something, and I was like, where did you learn that? And it was from 4th grade reading. We could never have tested that for him back in 4th grade, just because his language skills were not there, but he still learned something from being in the classroom. And then I wanted to go back to prerequisite skills in the pre-K curriculum. I like the way that these are written because you can actually see what a child can do, what some of the behaviors are, and then what some of the strategies that a teacher could use to help make that behavior happen.
Mary Jane, I'm sorry to interrupt you. There's that bar again across the top, so we can't see the headings.
You know what it is though, Judy? It's this thing up here, the screen sharing thing. I don't know how to get rid of that.
Oh, anyway. Okay. No problem. Sorry.
Okay. This is just another, I like Shelley Moore. She actually has a lot of great videos out there. I know Charlene talked about educational strategies for kids who are doing learning at home. She has a lot of great videos about that. She wants to think about SMART goals just a little bit differently.
Welcome to 5 more minutes, useful videos in about 5 minutes that support the teaching and learning of all students. I'm your host, Shelley Moore, and today's episode is called, Hey, see you later, SMART goals. So if you don't know what a SMART goal is, it's a strategy that uses an acronym that describes that goals should be specific, measurable, something else, timely. And if you are in the special education field, you probably, like me, think that they're the worst. So for a SMART goal, you basically take a behavior that you want to be displayed by another person and you turn it into something like maybe what my wife might say to me. Shelly will put her dirty clothes in the laundry basket 80% of the time with 96% accuracy by June 2020. It's never gonna happen. SMART goals are one goal setting strategy for sure, but it's nonsensical to assume that it's the only strategy for capturing my progress and growth to change as a laundry sorter, or as the only method we use of assessing growth for kids with disabilities. SMART goals are almost exclusively the only type of goals used to create individual education plans. But do you know why? I didn't either, so I needed to do some research. There was a time, and still is very much believed by people, that the only way to know that learning is happening is if it's captured by another person. And so the assumption is that if it can't be captured, well then learning must not be happening. Now you can see why this would be problematic then for individuals who learn in different ways or don't communicate in the same way as the person who's doing the assessing. Okay, so as you can see, there are a few problems here. Problem number 1, SMART goals rely on a very problematic assumption that goes directly against a fundamental understanding of inclusion, the importance of presuming competence. All kids can learn. Because of course someone is learning even if it can't be captured in the specific unit of measure preferred by the person or the system that is doing the assessment. Problem number 2. The other tricky thing about SMART goals is that if you think back to my laundry basket SMART goal example, the next question is to ask, well, who's going to collect that data? As a result, SMART goals have often left our educational assistants with the burden of spending large portions of their day creating frequency tallies, usually aiming to capture unwanted behaviors. And we all know that in a classroom, the more data-free hands we have on deck, the better for all students. Problem number 3. IEPs have also historically been designed to be implemented in only one setting, which is usually a self-contained or a segregated setting. In these settings, it doesn't matter if IEP goals are connected to non-disabled peers because they aren't together. But inclusive classrooms, now students with disabilities and their peers are learning together. So it's very tricky when one group of students is learning curriculum aligned with cognitive and learning goals, while kids with disabilities are learning curriculum that are connected to functional and behavior-based goals. Oh, we're not done. Problem number 4. Current curricular efforts, including in British Columbia, are starting to embrace more 21st century learning goals and competency-based curriculum for all students. This is great, but these competencies are not functional or behavioral. My friend and colleague Laura Tate refers to competencies as characteristics and elements of being, like for example, being joyful, being inclusive, being creative, and even being patient. How about even love? But can you imagine what a SMART goal would look like for the competency of being joyful? Shelly will be joyful 80% of the time with 96% accuracy by June 2020.
Oops. Ooh, dang it. Sorry. I clicked on the thing.
Welcome to 5 more minutes. Useful.
Let me go back.
Like if I'm not joyful, it's probably not my fault. Okay, so what's the solution to these problems? Well, let's think. What would researchers do? What's the alternative to quantitative data? Qualitative data. In qualitative research, it's not the quantity or frequency that you need to meet a goal, but to what quality, complexity, and number of ways or perspectives that it can be displayed. That's what matters. This type of assessment relies on triangulated evidence, or multiple types and examples, that is collected by the student, their family, and their teams. It is much more authentic and can take multiple forms without relying on the one way. This could be photos, videos, examples of student work, stories, gestures, and even movements. These forms are also much more interesting and meaningful to kids and their families than data tally charts. I mean, I wouldn't hang a behavior tally chart on my fridge, but that's just me. These formats can also be captured and valid at any time, not just at school or in a particular class or at a specific time of day or when a particular person is watching with a data tally chart. How exciting would it be if IEPs were written like this, from a qualitative lens, looking at strengths and possibilities of what kids are doing instead of trying to track failed attempts of what they can't or should be doing? Okay, so here's your job today. I want you to look at an IEP. This can be from any student, and I want you to try turning a SMART goal into an I can statement and remove all the numbers. I can be joyful. I can put my laundry in a basket. I can be on time. No, I can't. I can't be on time. Who am I kidding? Let's rewrite that SMART goal acronym to help us to create goals with students that are strength-based, meaningful, authentic, responsive, and triangulated. Okay, everybody, make sure you share this video with all of your friends so that we can start the SMART goal revolution. Hey, thanks for watching.
Okay. I see a lot of comments
All
came in.
positive.
So I want you also to look at your present levels and think about reframing them as what can your child do right now? That can word is so important. And that's really what I wanted you to think about from Shelley's video, can. What can your child do? So here's Katie, and her present level says Katie can transition from one activity to another with 6 to 7 verbal prompts from her teacher. So what should the goal be? So we're going to go back and look at some preschool curriculum guidelines, and this is in the social and emotional development domain. And look, here's one that talks about transitioning from one activity to another. It says using a daily schedule chart is what the teacher is going to use over here. The child participates in rules, transitions from one activity to another, comments on the sequence of days. And then the child follows rules and routines with occasional reminders from the teacher. And this is by 48 months. So everything that's in the preschool curriculum guideline is for a child who should be about 4 years old. They should be able to do these things. And it's really just the big goal of being able to follow simple routines when assisted by adults. So let's look at Katie and rephrase that. So, you know, remember, she could do it with 6 to 7 verbal prompts. Maybe we want her to do it independently, or maybe we want 2 verbal prompts. But using a schedule chart, Katie can transition from one activity to another with 2 verbal prompts from the teacher by the end of the school year. It's sort of simple. But I think when you walk into the classroom or you see Katie somewhere and she's got that schedule chart, anybody can see whether she's transitioning from one activity to another with pretty few prompts. If you wanted to get into data collection, you could definitely sit down and somebody could check if it's just 2 verbal prompts. But it'd be really nice to be able to word this that using a daily schedule chart, Katie can transition from one activity to another, you know, with no prompts from a teacher, independently by the end of the school year. So I like the preschool curriculum guidelines because it really sort of gives you all those condition, behavior criteria, and what the curriculum really is, and that overall goal. Let me see how many minutes I have. I am going to skip this video. It's a really cute video. It really talks about what is the overall purpose of a goal. We've got to start thinking higher level. And the reason I talk about that is because oops, now it's not going to let me move. To keep kids in the general ed classroom, sometimes we have to make general goals and use the unit of study. Too often I see we get these very specific goals for kids, and when they don't meet those goals in the first 6 weeks, well, then we've got to pull them out and do something else with them, and they're going to get pulled out of the general ed classroom because they can't meet that goal because the classroom is moving on to the next unit of study. So let's say in the science class, we're studying the phases of the moon, and your goal was to understand that there are 4 phases, be able to identify 4 phases of the moon. Well, in the next unit, we go on to a totally another topic. How are you going to work on that goal? Well, now you've got to be pulled out of the classroom to work on that if you didn't master it. So I think it's really important for you guys that have kids with more significant health needs that you look at the unit of study. When my son was moved to 6th and 7th grade, it was really nice because we could really sit down and look at the unit of study in science and social studies. A lot of times the textbooks are arranged by units of study, and really then be able to ask the general ed teacher, well, what's the big thing in this unit that you want kids to get out of it? This is where it's so important to have that general ed teacher in your IEP meeting, especially for the next year. So you can say, you know, the special ed teacher might look at the curriculum and go, oh, we're going to focus on these things. And then the general ed teacher goes, we don't spend any time on that. We're doing this, and this is what I want the kids to learn. So that's why it's really important to have the general ed teacher in the IEP meeting. Too often I see families just tell the district, oh, the general ed teacher doesn't have to be in the IEP meeting. We don't need her here. But I mean, that's why you need the general ed teacher there. You want to find out what are they working on in the regular curriculum, and how is my child going to do that? Anyway, I've given some examples here. You know, within the unit of study, when given 2 picture choices, Anna can match 3 to 4 vocabulary words to their corresponding picture. Anybody can see what Anna's going to do, right? She's shown 2 pictures. Can she match 3 or 4 of those vocabulary words to those pictures? We know whether she can do it or not. Within the unit of study, when given 2 picture choices, Bill can identify the main idea of the story by looking at the correct picture. He might be a kid who's nonverbal and is just practicing looking from one picture to the other picture just to be able to identify the main idea of the story. Or the main idea of the unit. It makes it easier for the gen ed teacher to really focus on big ideas versus individualized topics that may not have any meaning in the class. So this, I mean, even the vocabulary word one doesn't necessarily have to be in an English language arts class. It could be in social studies. It could be in science. You could use that same goal across the curriculum, math vocabulary words. My son he loved dates and timelines. And so we, did matching of pictures on dates on the timeline. There's where you're using the kids' strengths to develop a goal. And, he could participate in social studies when they were talking about timelines and understand and learn things. So what is the most essential part of a goal? Do I hear anyone out there? Is anyone out there? I can't see anybody, because if I do that, then...
They're thinking.
Yeah, I can't see them think.
Making sure it works for the child. For my son, like for us, we set up his goals in periods of the school. Like we have a percentage of where we see him achieving that goal. And every time we revisit the goal, we see like where he is at that present time.
So is that measuring the goal maybe?
Yes, measuring the goal throughout his school year.
Yeah, and I think that's one thing, we have to think about how they're going to measure it. What can you see a child do, or how are you going to collect data? You heard her talk about that, who's going to collect that data, but really making it the goal measurable so that anybody can see what's happening. You remember that first goal that I gave you, that I showed you from an IEP I got this week and looked at. I have no idea what we're measuring. Even though it said with 75% accuracy, I have no clue what we're measuring. I didn't, it was comprehension questions. who knows? I don't know what we're measuring, and nobody would know that. So it's really important to figure out how to measure it. And I mean, a lot of times we're going to be using STAR or STAR Alt to measure. For those of you that are really geeky, I used to use the release test to figure out what we needed to focus on for math and reading. If it wasn't going to get tested, we didn't focus on it. You can go into the release test for STAR, Alt 2, and STAR and see what they're going to be doing at that grade level and focus on that. I mean, it's up to you. I really wanted my child to focus on reading and vocabulary because that's so important in life. But that was me. You may have other things you want to focus on. But I think it's important for everybody on the IEP team to think about other ways of measuring progress. Like Shelley talked about, like Charlene talked about, there are creative ways for measuring progress. Portfolios, video. I mean, there's just lots of different ways to think about progress. But it's up to everyone on the team to write that down. How are we going to measure progress on this goal? Too often, you know, I see these general things written down. And you all need to think about that when you're looking at your goals. How is somebody going to measure progress on your kid? And when is progress going to be measured? It should be the same time when everybody else is getting a grade report, whether that's 6 or 9 weeks. So, you know, you need to think about that and discuss that in your IEP meeting.
Mary Jane,
Yes?
there was a comment, intuitively, it makes sense, for example, goal to read fluently and answer with questions by end of year, and breaking down mini goals by quarter and progress monitoring.
That's correct. I mean, technically, goals are only required for kids. Objectives are not required for kids who are not taking STAR Alt 2. Technically, they should just have a goal written. But those objectives should be all those steps it takes to get to the goal. The goal that I shared with you earlier, their steps to take to that goal were, well, by this date, he'll have 50%, and by this date, he'll have 75%. Still didn't tell me how he was going to get there. Those objectives should really be clear on what are the steps we're going to take to get to the big goal. I'm not sure that teachers are really taught how to write goals. Even in special education, I'm not sure who's teaching them, but there's lots of different ways to do it. But I think we need to start thinking practically about what can your child do. I went to one of my friend's IEP meetings once when her child was in kindergarten, and it was about her son had difficulty after using the restroom, pulling up his pants and getting them zippered. Well, the problem wasn't going to the bathroom. We didn't have to set bathroom goals for him. It was more of an occupational therapy goal than anything. But when I stopped the meeting and I said, what do we want this child, what do we want him to do by the end of the year? It sort of reframed how everybody started thinking about it, because they got so focused on, you know, oh, he's gonna go to the restroom on a regular basis. Well, that wasn't the issue at all. So when you look at your goals and objectives, really it's about, does this make a meaningful difference in your students, you know, your life? Does it allow them to participate more fully? And does it allow them to participate in new environments? If yes, then it's a great goal. If not, maybe you need to try again. I'm going to get into least restrictive environment. On the left is the law. From IDEA, you know, to the maximum extent appropriate, children with disabilities are educated with children who are non-disabled in special classes, separate schooling, or other removal from regular education only occurs if the nature or severity of the disability is such that education in the regular class with the use of supplementary aids and service cannot be achieved satisfactorily. So in real people language, and this is from my friend Charlene, she wrote this: as much as possible, your child's taught with kids who don't have disabilities and taken out of the regular classroom and put in special classes only if your child's is so severe that he can't get any educational benefit. even with supplementary aids and services in the general ed classroom. And I think that's the big part that people forget about, is the supplementary aids and services. We forget that we have all these supports that can be used in the general ed setting to get our kids in there. So on our Texas Project First website, we have a planning for participation matrix, and it really goes through some questions. And when you're looking at your goals, can the child accomplish this goal in the classroom as is, meaning no extra help or whatever? If yes, okay, move forward. Do they need adapted materials? Okay, who's going to make those materials? Who's responsible for that, etc.? Do they need help from someone or some sort of equipment? If yes, great, let's write that down. If no, do we need to adapt the curriculum or the expectations? Yes, let's stay in the classroom. No, okay, let's move to the next one. Do they need an alternative assignment or activity in the room? Yes, okay, let's stay in the classroom. No, let's move to number 6. They need to be in an alternative assignment or activity in an alternative setting rather than the regular classroom. And so you need to take your goals and really plan for that. And there's a matrix on there where you can put your goals and then put the activities or class schedule across the top and make those decisions. We've got 3 examples on there, 1st grade, a 5th grade, and a high school example, I think. So here's one, given a unit of study, I guess this is Chris, will match pictures and or definitions of 10 vocabulary words. He can do that in English language arts, in spelling, and social studies. Oh, look, number 2 down here is adapted materials. Chris needed a larger font for all his worksheets or all his things that he was working on. Everything was in a 16-point font. And then number 4, adapted expectations. In English language arts, all the rest of the kids were doing 20 words, vocabulary words. He only was required to do 10 words. Over here in spelling, he could participate in spelling as is, just like everybody else. He was good at spelling. So you can see how you can use these. There's as is with direction and supervision, adapted materials, personal assistance or equipment, adapted expectations, alternative in-class assignment, or alternative setting. There was nobody where we felt that during the schedule, Christopher had to be pulled out and go somewhere else based on his goals. So when you get to the placement part of the discussion in your IEP, which should be last, after you've used this matrix, you should be able to determine what % of the day is your child removed from the regular ed setting. If your child's in the regular ed setting with an aid, that doesn't count. But in Texas, we have what's called a continuum of instruction, regular classes, resource classes, self-contained, separate schools, or homebound or hospitals. So you can see on the line, less restrictive is over here and more restrictive is over here. And in Texas, we like to call it different things, and we call it instructional arrangement. And at the last page of close to the last page of your IEP, you're going to find this number, and it will tell you what instructional arrangement your child currently is. 4041 is the least restrictive, either mainstream or resource, because you're pulled out for less than 20% of the day. And then 6 self-contained classes are greater than 60% of the day. Why is this important? We had a family come to us at the beginning of a school year, and they said, in my last IEP in another district, they told me he was going to be in general ed with support. They had the meeting before school started. He was at his home campus. All plans were for him to participate there. The school district got the papers from the other district. and all of a sudden called her up the day before school started and said, no, your child won't be going to your home school. Your child will be going over to XYZ campus because that's where we have a self-contained setting. And she was just, upset, and she didn't understand why. And when we finally got down to it, we looked at our IEP, and his instructional arrangement was a 44 code, which meant he was going to be in a self-contained classroom for 60% of the day. And she didn't even realize it for some reason. But anyway, that's why that code is so important. If you think they're discussing mainstream and resource classes, and you get to the end and you see that the code is a 44, you're in for a surprise next year when your kids start school.
Mary Jane, I'm sorry to
yes.
interrupt. Not this slide, not the last slide, but the slide before. A parent was asking that one. Do you have a blank template of that?
Yes, this one is on the Texas Project First website under the planning matrix. If you just go to Texas Project First and Google planning matrix, it'll pull up the page. Under placement, it's the red box placement on each of the age range pages, and there's a sample there. Just some resources out there besides use that IDEA manual that Disability Rights Texas has. Texas Project First is a great resource. Progress in the General Curriculum has some wonderful, especially on IEP annual goal development. They have this document here. I'm sure it's been revised since this picture. I just had good pictures from old ones. It's really a good resource for IEPs and least restrictive environment. They also have some information about scheduling for inclusion, paraprofessionals, and they actually have an IEP goal development 7-part course that you can take for free if you really are interested. So I am going to stop. No, I'm going to share it for a few more minutes. What did you learn? And you can unmute yourself. You don't have to put it in the chat. And I'm going to keep this up here because if you want to take the survey, you can put your phone over the QR code, or I guess Christina will probably put in the chat
Yeah, it is in the chat.
Yeah. What did you learn from this? I hope you learned something out of it. It was very quick and I was going really a lot faster than I'd like to go, but anyway.
The importance of goals and how they can impact our kids' education and the way we set them up, how it makes a difference for them and their progress.
And the way that they set them up also is going to help you understand if they're making progress or not. We get these report cards sometimes and it just says they're making progress, but if the goals aren't really specific and you don't know how they're being measured, they can say anything, right? So yeah.
That has helped with us, with my son, where we had an incident in a school where they had goals that we were not at all happy with. We were like, these are not working for our son. And at the same time, the way they set them up help us show these are not appropriate goals for my son.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Leonella.
Anyone else?
I was just going to share that, this is Jennifer, hi, that when my son, he's actually in private school now, he's in public school, he, every report, it was every quarter, was doing well. They said he was, progressing and at this point, and then we got to the yard, they said, well, no, he isn't at the same level as everybody else. So he needs to go. And because there's another kid with the same diagnosis that's in pullout more often, he needs to go in the pullout more often too. And so all of a sudden the IEP part kind of, it was very much of a blindsided thing. It was almost like of their schooling education and curriculum. So it's good to have templates like this with goals, because then they can see the longer term vision and communicating the strengths and communicating like the breakdown of what your goals are and what they need. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other things? Did anybody learn anything else? Well, I mean, feel free to, reach out to family. We will send out this presentation afterwards to everybody that's participated, and I'll put it in a PDF. Again, a lot of the stuff is on our Texas Project First website. Even if you get to the writing goals section, it really talks a lot about that. You're more than welcome to reach out to us and
So thank you so much, Mary Jane.
oh, you're welcome.
One of the questions, this is such important information I wish I had had many, many years ago. One of the questions somebody had asked is, in order to complete the survey, do you have to be a member of SurveyMonkey? You do not.
No.
So please do not worry about that. And the question about, the order of the classes, yes, our class was postponed because of the ice storm that we had. So the next class is now going to be March 20th and then April 17th. So March 20th was originally going to be our last class, but now April 17th will be our last class because we had to postpone the other class from the ice storm. So my apologies for the conclusion, and I hope that answered your question that you sent.
And actually, I think the flow is actually better.
Yeah. Yeah, everything happens for a reason, supposedly. So if I did not answer your question properly, please let me know. Like I said, I will be sending out next week the recordings as well as the survey again. And if you have any trouble completing the survey, just let me know and we can help you. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I want to thank that would have occurred. No, Stephen, this is not the class that would have occurred during the storm. This is our regularly scheduled class. The class that was going to be in the storm is the one that's going to be in April. So that's when it was rescheduled to. So yes, the next class is number 4 as far as topic goes. Yes, that is correct. Thank you, Stephen. If there's any other questions, do let me know. Mary Jane, thank you for your time, for your expertise, and just so happy that you all joined us today. I wish you a wonderful rest of the day. I know these continue to be very challenging times for all of our families. At Family to Family Network, we're here to help. We're here to do what we can. And yes, I will send the survey link to you in an email. So if you have trouble getting it from your chat box, I'll be happy to send it to you in an email. Thank you all so much. Have a great day.
Everybody.
Thank you so much for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.